Sheriff Gary McFadden of the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office, bringing you another edition of MCSO News 45. Well, today we want to talk about another hot topic that has been in the news, been on social media, and also in many conversations across Mecklenburg County. It is the reopening of the Juvenile Detention Center, commonly known as North. Now, if you remember that the Juvenile Detention Center was closed by me, the sheriff in Mecklenburg County. And here's why. During the time of COVID, our staffing levels at the Central Detention Center, which is the main detention center downtown, was at the same level of everyone's detention centers or staffing during the Great Resignation. And what is the Great Resignation? During COVID, many people left and quit their jobs and didn't come back. So during that time, the Department of Health, Human Resources, or jail inspectors came and inspected our jail at Central. And they said that we have to get our staffing numbers up. So then we all know that it became a very political ball play with myself and the jail inspectors. If you remember, back in 2024, a jail inspector actually admitted that he lied about a process and procedure. And when he lied about it, we asked the state to investigate it. We asked the Attorney General office to investigate it, and we asked his agency to investigate it. Well, we do not know the results of that investigation, but we do know that he was untruthful and he remained employed by the jail inspectors. So during that time of our crisis, like everyone else during COVID, it was asked, you have to find some resolution to bring more staffing inside to the Central Detention Center, which we asked other agencies, how can they help us? But of course, no one could help us during the COVID crisis. So then we had to make a very tough decision because the state was compelling that we find more resources and more staffing for Central. So we made the very difficult decision to close Jail North, commonly known as the Juvenile Detention Center. Now, that was a very hard pill to swallow. Why? Because I love the juveniles and the Juvenile Detention Center, and this was the best juvenile detention center in the state. And here's why. They did a study, which is called the Chin Study. And this study looked at the feasible study of using the detention center of North Carolina statewide. And this study says that the Mecklenburg County Detention Center, commonly known as North, would be the best and viable detention center for its use. So this is why we opened the detention center shortly after I became sheriff. But as we know, and we hate to say that politics played a big part. And so we closed the Juvenile Detention Center. So now it's always, well, Sheriff, can you reopen the Juvenile Detention Center? Sheriff, the ball is in your court to open the Juvenile Detention Center. Sheriff, why don't you open the Juvenile Detention Center? Well, let me make it perfectly clear to each and every one of you. Sheriff Gary McFadden of the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office, the Sheriff of Mecklenburg County, would gladly open the Juvenile Detention Center if we have the resources and the funding. I am willing to open the Juvenile Detention Center again and have the best juvenile detention center in the state for our juveniles, because clearly we did not want to close it, but politics forced us to close it. Now, how are we going to reopen that Juvenile Detention Center now? The conversations are back and forth, and it always says the ball in your court. Well, let me make sure that you understand this. Statutorily, we are not mandated to run a juvenile detention center, but we will take on that responsibility. Let me say that again. We are not mandated, and it's not statutorily required that we run a juvenile detention center. So when we took on this task, it is a favor to the state of North Carolina Department of Juvenile Justice as a favor to open this juvenile detention center, which in fact, it would be greatly needed because of the population of the Mecklenburg County juveniles who are in juvenile detention. Yes, we have the largest population of juveniles probably in the detention center. And yes, we would be glad to open the juvenile detention center if we have the funding and resources. So back and forth with all these meetings. Sometimes we are involved with the meetings and sometimes we are not involved in the meeting. But the last couple of meetings that we've had is with Safe Alliance and some other entities, including juvenile justice and Mr. Lassiter, and commonly known as Billy Lassiter. So the final issue was that they wanted Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office to recruit, hire, and train everyone to open this juvenile detention center. They want us to use our recruiters to recruit, our recruiters to hire, and our staff to train. Now, why is that complicated at this moment? Because the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office opened their first basic law enforcement training facility. BLET is commonly known, BLET. So we are hiring people for our BLET staff, and we also are hiring people for our detention staff. So we are doing two hiring processes, one for basic law enforcement training for our deputies, and we're doing another hiring process for detention officers. But the state now is asking us to use our same staff to recruit, hire, and train for a juvenile detention center. So simply they're asking us to write a check. So believe it or not, we took a strong look at what would it take to staff that facility. So imagine we are hiring from the same pool of Pineville, Matthews, Mint Hill, Hunterville, Cornelius, Davidson, and also our big brother CMPD. So we are hiring from the same pool that 7 other agencies are hiring from. But we did take a look at it. So here are the numbers. To open the juvenile detention center at North, it will take a staff of 96 detention officers. That is 20 detention officers per shift, including a captain, 2 sergeants, and a field training officer. So each shift, which are 4 shifts that will operate a juvenile detention center, will have a minimum of 25 staff. That is 20 detention officers, 1 captain, 2 sergeant, a field training officer, and of course maybe a major. So we move on from that. We will have an administrative staff, not included with these 20 or 25. The administrative staff will be 1 major, administrative major, an administrative sergeant, and administrative support staff. So that is another additional 3 people. Now, if we move from that, we have to have a health provider. We do have a health provider, which is VitalCorps. VitalCorps will have to produce a RN, an LP, and at least 2 mental health providers. So that is an additional 3, a minimum of 4 people, 24 hours a day. We move forward. Our juveniles will have to eat. So our provider is Airmark, which we love, and we have a great relationship with them. We will now have to incorporate feeding these juveniles. So then that's additional to our budget. So we're going to have people to prep the food, and then we're going to have people to serve the food, which means putting the carts together and distribute them through the facility. So that is an additional to the 20 or 96. Now, we also have a building to maintain. We have to maintain a building. We have to ask TKC, who is our maintainer provider, to do that. And finally, we have juveniles. We have to have at least 5 program managers to provide programming and staff to these individuals. Prior to this, we even had CMS. Our juvenile detention center had CMS teachers coming in and providing them the necessary education to continue their life. So after all of this, we will still need staffing for programming. That's programming manager, that's programming assistant manager, and that is a support team. And we haven't even talked about the items of computers and desks and everything like that. So if this is what they want us to do, we're asking the state to provide us more than a blank check. We're asking them to, if you want to create the Mecklenburg County Juvenile Detention Center again, create a hiring process that will hire them, recruit them, and we will even help you with training them. But we solely just can't do this by ourselves in simply also taking care of both our facilities, meaning our training facility and central. So we're going to ask the state to come back to the table publicly, and let's talk about this publicly so we have it all aired out. So it won't be only on the sheriff of Mecklenburg County and the ball is not in my court. Why? Because it's not my court, because we are not statutorily mandated to run a juvenile detention center. But we are willing to take on that responsibility if the state of North Carolina, the Department of Juvenile Justice, DPS, come to the table with more than a blank check. We're asking you to provide men and women to do recruiting, hiring, and we will help with the training. And we can open the best juvenile detention center back in the state. Why? Because the Chin report says this: we are the cream of the crop, and we did run the best juvenile detention center in the state. But here's why I think it's so complicated again. The comparison is the Cabarrus County Juvenile Detention Center, which is commonly known as Stonewall Jackson. At this present time, it was told to me that there are at least 30 to 40% vacancies at that unit. 30 to 40% vacancies. So if you cannot fill those vacancies at Stonewall Jackson or Cabarrus County, why do you believe that you could take this and just make it into a juvenile detention center? But here's another analogy that I've said to the state. Close Stonewall Jackson facility or Cabarrus County, and I will hire each and every one of those individuals to work in the Jail North Juvenile Detention Center, which we could actually fully staff it, and we will not have to worry about recruiting, we won't have to worry about training, and we won't have to worry about hiring. We will all just move everybody over and bring all of the resources and all that you have at Cabarrus County and bring them over to Mecklenburg County and create a premier juvenile detention center. But again, finally, the Mecklenburg County Sheriff is willing to assist, but not take on the full burden of recruiting, hiring, and training. We will take on part of it, but you have to meet us better than you're meeting us now with simply a blank check, allowing us to hire, recruit, and train. That is not acceptable. But again, bottom line, we are willing to open it and we are willing to run it, but we do need your assistance. But we haven't talked about funding yet. So who's going to have Mecklenburg County to look into this to see if they are willing to assist with the funding of opening the juvenile detention center? It would be the best, it would be the premier, but we will need more collaboration, communication, and cooperation. But thank you again, MCSO News 45. Thank you.